What makes a person believe something without ever questioning it? What causes someone to repeat ideas they never truly examined? What convinces a mind to surrender its own curiosity? These questions matter more than ever in a world where religious belief still dominates much of human thought. Religions don't merely ask people to believe. They train them to stop thinking critically. The methods used aren't new, and they're not unique to one religion. They appear across cultures, continents, and centuries, always using the same playbook: control the mind, and the rest follows. One of the most effective tools is repetition. Say anything often enough, and it starts to feel true. Religious rituals are built on this. Repeating the same prayers every day, singing the same hymns, reciting the same verses. These aren't harmless customs. They're mental conditioning. The brain starts to associate familiarity with truth. Not because it's been tested, but because it's been repeated. A lie, repeated endlessly, can begin to feel more comforting than a truth that's unfamiliar. Another tactic is starting young. The earlier a belief is planted, the harder it is to uproot. Almost every religion targets children. Sunday schools, Quran classes, temple recitations. These are not designed to foster independent thought. They are designed to anchor belief before reason develops. Children aren't taught how to think about religion. They're taught what to think. That's not education. That's indoctrination. Religions also reframe doubt as weakness. If you start questioning, it's not seen as intelligence. It's seen as a lack of faith. They don't just disagree with skepticism. They punish it. Some do it openly through shame or fear. Others do it quietly, through social exclusion or guilt. Either way, doubt becomes a problem to get rid of, not a tool to grow with. Another method is emotional manipulation. Religion often links belief to love, family, and identity. You're not just rejecting an idea if you walk away. You're rejecting your parents. You're betraying your community. You're cutting ties with people who raised you. That emotional weight is heavy. Most people would rather silence their doubts than risk that kind of loss. So belief continues. Not because it's reasonable, but because it's easier. Some religions go further and create a closed system of thinking. In this system, all the answers must come from within the religion. You're taught that truth can only be found in one book, one leader, one tradition. Anything from outside is dangerous. Science, philosophy, psychology, they're treated like threats, not tools. This isolates the mind. It cuts off curiosity at the root. You stop looking for better answers because you've been told that everything worth knowing has already been revealed. There's also the use of fear. Fear of punishment. Fear of death. Fear of hell. Fear of the unknown. It's not just that you're told what to believe. You're told what will happen if you don't. And those consequences are often extreme. Eternal torture. Divine wrath. Rebirth in a lower form. These are not metaphors for most believers. They are real fears, reinforced every day. This fear keeps people in line. It's not truth that keeps them loyal. It's terror. And when fear isn't enough, religions promise reward. Eternal happiness, paradise, enlightenment, salvation. These promises are always just out of reach. After death, after judgment, after you've given enough, obeyed enough, suffered enough. The reward is never here, but the obedience is expected now. This is classic behavioral conditioning. Create a distant reward, tie it to present behavior, and reinforce it with repetition and community pressure. People are trained to live for a future they can't examine, can't test, and can't question. Another tactic is creating insiders and outsiders. You're either one of us or you're lost. You're either saved or damned. You either believe or you're broken. This binary thinking eliminates nuance. It draws a moral line around the group and treats everything outside it as dangerous or inferior. It makes people afraid of difference, suspicious of other ideas, hostile to outsiders. Once that division is accepted, it becomes very difficult to leave. Because leaving doesn't just mean losing beliefs, it means losing your place in the group. Religions also reshape language. Words like truth, faith, sin, holy, evil, miracle. They're redefined within the system. They don't mean what they mean outside. And once language is twisted, thinking becomes twisted too. If questioning is called rebellion, if disobedience is called sin, if curiosity is framed as pride, then the mind learns to censor itself. This is how control is maintained. Not by force, but by training people to police their own thoughts. Another tactic is rewriting history. Many religious stories are presented as fact, even when they're unsupported or clearly mythological. Events are exaggerated. Characters are idealized. Miracles are inserted. And because these stories are repeated so often, they're rarely questioned. But they're not history. They're propaganda. They're designed to give the religion authority and credibility it didn't earn. Religions also weaponize humility. You're told you're broken, flawed, sinful by nature. That you need saving. That you are nothing without the divine. This destroys confidence. It makes people dependent. If you're convinced you're unworthy, you'll accept anything that promises to fix you, no matter how unreasonable it is. The lower your self-worth, the easier it is to manipulate you. Guilt plays a major role too. You're told your thoughts are impure. Your desires are wrong. Your actions are never good enough. Even your doubts are sins. You start to feel guilty, not just for what you do, but for who you are. That guilt makes you vulnerable. It pushes you to seek forgiveness through the same system that created the guilt in the first place. It's a trap. Create guilt, then sell relief, over and over again. Rituals are another powerful tool. They seem harmless. Lighting candles, wearing symbols, reciting prayers. But they serve a deeper function. They anchor belief in behavior. The more you participate in rituals, the more connected you feel to the group. The more connected you feel, the harder it is to question. Rituals are not just expressions of belief, they are reinforcements of it. Even when belief fades, rituals can keep people trapped. Then there's the glorification of obedience. In most religions, the highest virtues are not creativity, intelligence, or doubt. They are obedience, loyalty, and submission. You are rewarded for believing without evidence. Praised for accepting without question. That's not virtue. That's control. And it's not accidental. It's designed to train people to follow without resisting. Religions also discourage solitude. There are weekly gatherings, group prayers, pilgrimages, festivals, always something communal. Isolation is seen as dangerous. Not because it is, but because alone time leads to reflection. And reflection leads to questions. So constant social reinforcement is used to drown out doubt. You're not just surrounded by believers. You're immersed in belief. There's no room to think. Even art and music are used to influence the mind. Emotional music, dramatic imagery, sacred architecture. These bypass reason. They go straight to emotion. They create awe, reverence, even fear. And those emotions are tied to belief. When the music swells and the candles flicker and the voices chant, you don't analyze. You absorb. The rational mind is quieted. And that's the point. Religions also claim total authority over morality. You're told that without the religion, there would be no right or wrong. That morality comes from God, not reason. That if you abandon belief, you abandon ethics. This is false, but it's powerful. It makes people afraid of their own freedom. It makes them think they can't trust themselves. So they submit to external rules instead of developing internal wisdom. They also exploit personal struggles. When people are in pain, grief, loss, illness, failure, they are vulnerable. And religion steps in, with answers, with comfort, with community. But that help often comes with strings. You're welcomed, but only if you accept the beliefs. You're supported, but only if you conform. And once you're inside, it's hard to leave, because leaving feels like losing the only support you had. Even silence is used as a tactic. Questions that can't be answered are avoided. Stories that contradict each other are ignored. Moral failures by religious leaders are brushed aside. The silence isn't neutral. It's selective. It hides weakness, suppresses doubt, and protects the image of the institution. What you don't talk about can't be questioned, and what can't be questioned becomes sacred. The loyalty demanded by religion is rarely about ideas. It's about allegiance. You're not encouraged to think for yourself. You're encouraged to believe what you're told and defend it as if your identity depends on it. Because it does. Religion doesn't just live in belief. It lives in identity. So any challenge to the belief feels like a threat to the self. This is how questioning becomes emotionally dangerous. It's not just about what's true anymore. It's about who you are allowed to be. Another tactic is to overload the believer with complexity. Theologies are often dense, contradictory, and difficult to understand. But rather than encouraging people to examine them, religions often turn that confusion into a virtue. God works in mysterious ways. You must have faith, not understanding. This is a strategy. If a system is too confusing to follow logically, it becomes easier to follow blindly. Complexity becomes a smokescreen for control. Religions also thrive on scarcity. In many belief systems, truth is framed as rare. Most people are seen as deceived. Only this one group, this one church, this one doctrine holds the real truth. This scarcity model increases the value of belief. It makes people afraid to leave because they're told they'll never find truth again. And it makes people defensive because any disagreement threatens their sense of security. Control is also maintained by monopolizing major life events: birth, coming of age, marriage, death. Religion inserts itself into all of them. These aren't just traditions. They are checkpoints. Moments where belief is reinforced with ritual, community, and pressure. If religion controls your life's milestones, it quietly becomes the framework for your entire identity. Every important memory is tied to the system, which makes leaving it feel like erasing your own life story. Religions also discourage open-ended exploration. There's always a right answer waiting at the end of every question. You're not encouraged to wander, only to return. Exploration is tolerated as long as it brings you back to belief. But real intellectual freedom doesn't work that way. It requires the freedom to follow a question wherever it leads, even if it leads outside the boundaries of faith. That kind of freedom is seen as dangerous, not because it is, but because it breaks the spell. Even language like believer and non-believer is loaded. It casts people in terms of loyalty. You're either with the truth or against it. This creates a world where disagreement isn't intellectual, it's moral. You're not just wrong. You're fallen. You're not just different. You're corrupt. This kind of framing makes productive conversation impossible. It shuts down empathy. It fuels division. Religious teachings also reward passivity. You're told not to seek justice yourself, that it will be handled by divine forces, that revenge is sinful, that suffering is part of a larger plan. These ideas don't make people more peaceful. They make them more tolerant of abuse, more willing to accept injustice, more likely to stay silent when they should speak up. This serves those in power, not those in pain. And those in power often use religion as their shield. Kings, dictators, even elected leaders invoke religious authority to silence criticism. If you challenge them, you're not just challenging a man, you're challenging God. This tactic has been used for centuries to justify wars, violence, discrimination, and suppression. The line between religion and power is often blurred, not by accident, but by design. Religions also plant the idea that doubt is a test. If you question the faith, you're told it's part of a divine trial, not a sign that something's wrong, just a hurdle to overcome. This reframing is clever. It takes the natural human instinct to question and turns it into something that must be defeated. It transforms curiosity into a threat and then sells you the cure. They also claim that belief is a choice, but the reality is very different. You're born into a faith, taught it before you can reason, surrounded by it, pressured by it, punished for questioning it. That's not choice. That's conditioning. And calling it a choice is another tactic, because it makes the victim responsible for their own indoctrination. It creates the illusion of consent. Even when people leave religion, the residue can remain. The guilt, the fear, the way of thinking, the tendency to accept authority without question, to avoid doubt, to feel shame for natural impulses. That's the lasting effect of indoctrination. It doesn't end when belief ends. It ends when the thought patterns themselves are unlearned. There's also the tactic of cherry picking. Religions often contain contradictions, violent passages and peaceful ones, cruel teachings and kind ones. When challenged, believers are trained to ignore the ugly parts and highlight only the pleasant ones. But a belief system must be judged by the whole of it, not just the parts that sound good in a sermon. Ignoring the rest doesn't make them disappear. It just makes them harder to confront. Some religions encourage isolation from the world. They tell followers to avoid non-believers, to stay away from other ideas, to see the outside world as corrupt. This separation isn't about spiritual purity. It's about control. If people never see anything else, they never question what they've been taught. It's easier to believe a lie if you're never exposed to alternatives. Religions also appeal to identity during crisis. When a person is sick, grieving, or desperate, they're more open to belief. And the system knows this. Missionaries don't show up when people are thriving. They show up when people are vulnerable. This isn't compassion. It's strategy. Target the broken. Offer comfort. Tied to belief. Then claim loyalty as healing. They also set up a system where suffering becomes meaningful. If you're struggling, you're told it's a test, or a blessing in disguise, or punishment for past sins. But in all cases, the answer is always internal. You must change. You must accept. You must endure. This interpretation prevents people from addressing the real causes of their pain: poverty, inequality, abuse, because the cause is always spiritual, never systemic. Another tactic is false certainty. Religion offers answers to questions we don't know. What happens after death? Where the universe came from? What consciousness is? These are deep, complex mysteries. But instead of exploring them honestly, religions give prepackaged answers. Not because they know, but because people crave certainty. And when uncertainty feels uncomfortable, any answer, no matter how unlikely, can feel better than none. Even the concept of sin is a control tool. You're told certain thoughts, actions, even feelings are sinful. Not because they harm anyone, but because they defy authority. This builds internal surveillance. You start monitoring your own mind. You begin to feel shame for being human. And once shame is internalized, control becomes effortless. You don't need to be punished anymore. You punish yourself. Many religious systems also claim to have predicted modern science. They retrofit vague verses to match modern discoveries. A verse that once meant something metaphorical is suddenly declared a prophecy when it sounds like it aligns with modern findings. But this isn't evidence. It's reinterpretation after the fact. A belief that bends itself to match reality is not truth-seeking. It's self-preserving. Even charity can be conditional. Many religious groups provide help, but with expectations attached. Attend a service, accept a scripture, join a group. This isn't generosity. It's recruitment. True kindness helps without asking anything in return. But religious charity often asks for loyalty and disguises it as compassion. The most dangerous tactic, though, is convincing people that this is all for their own good. That obedience is freedom. That surrender is peace. That silence is wisdom. Once a person accepts that, they stop resisting. They defend the very system that controls them. That's the final stage of indoctrination, when the chains are invisible and the prisoner believes he's free. When people are conditioned long enough, they start defending the system even when it harms them. They say they're choosing it, that it's not control, it's faith, that it's not fear, it's devotion. But they never ask where those feelings came from. They never stop to consider how deeply they were shaped. Because the system trains people not to look inward too closely, and not to question the roots of their belief. Religions often present themselves as the ultimate source of meaning, but they don't offer real meaning. They offer pre-written scripts, ready-made identities, standard answers to life's hardest questions. They don't help people build meaning. They hand it to them and demand loyalty in return. But meaning built under pressure is fragile. It can't survive honest reflection. There's also the tactic of sacred texts being declared perfect, infallible, beyond critique. This shuts down all discussion. If something is perfect, it can't be wrong. If it can't be wrong, it can't be questioned. And if it can't be questioned, it becomes untouchable, no matter how outdated, harmful, or absurd its contents are. That's how ideas become frozen in time, no longer subject to human improvement. And when those texts are written in ancient or inaccessible languages, another layer of control is added. Most followers don't read the original texts. They depend on religious leaders to interpret them. This creates a power imbalance. If only a few can understand the truth, then only they can define it. This gatekeeping ensures that followers remain dependent, not just on the book, but on the people who claim to explain it. Religions also claim that suffering is noble, that pain purifies, that sacrifice is holy. This isn't just about morality, it's about control. If people are taught to find virtue in suffering, they'll accept lives of hardship without protest. They'll stop fighting for better conditions. They'll tolerate injustice, because they've been told their suffering has a divine purpose. This belief doesn't uplift the poor, it pacifies them. Another layer is found in community reinforcement. In tightly knit religious groups, dissent becomes dangerous, not just because of doctrine, but because of social pressure. Questioning the faith risks isolation. Criticizing leaders risks exile. Believers often police each other, not because they're cruel, but because the system has made belief central to belonging. In such environments, conformity becomes survival. Then there's the use of circular logic. Religion often justifies itself with itself. The book is true because it says it's true. The doctrine is divine because it claims to be divine. The leaders are right because they've been chosen. This circularity is not accidental. It's meant to trap the mind. Once you're inside the loop, it becomes very hard to break out, unless you learn to recognize the loop for what it is. Religious ideas are often presented as eternal, as if nothing ever changes. But history tells a different story. Beliefs evolve, practices change, doctrines shift. Yet each generation is told their version is the final truth. This false permanence creates a sense of urgency. You must believe now. You must act now. Because this truth will never change. But it always does. Slowly, quietly, under pressure, like all human systems. Even the aesthetics are strategic. The robes, the incense, the chants, the architecture, the symbols. They aren't just decoration. They're designed to evoke reverence, to reinforce authority. If something looks sacred, it feels sacred. If it feels sacred, people hesitate to question it. This manipulation of perception is subtle, but incredibly effective. There's also the theft of credit. When good things happen, believers are told to thank God. When bad things happen, they're told to blame themselves. This dynamic removes accountability from the belief system. It places responsibility entirely on the individual. Success is a gift from above. Failure is your own fault. This imbalance keeps people humble, obedient, and constantly striving, no matter how unfair the outcome. Another tactic is the moral high ground. Religions often claim to be the source of morality, while dismissing other ethical systems as incomplete or misguided. This creates arrogance disguised as virtue. It tells followers they are better people simply because they believe. It encourages judgment. It fuels division. And it silences debate. Because who wants to question someone who claims to speak for the ultimate good? Religions also create emotional dependency. Believers are encouraged to pray during every struggle, consult scripture during every crisis, seek counsel during every doubt. This replaces internal resilience with external reliance. People stop trusting themselves. They start outsourcing their strength to an invisible source. And once that dependency is built, the system becomes indispensable, even if it never delivers what it promises. The structure of religious gatherings also serves a purpose. Weekly services, group confessions, collective worship. These aren't just rituals. They're reinforcement schedules. They keep people immersed, keep belief fresh, keep questions buried. If belief is a fire, these gatherings are the constant kindling. They ensure it never burns out. Even the very idea of an afterlife is a tactic. It takes the mystery of death, the great unknown, and fills it with rules, rewards, and punishments. It turns death into a motivator for lifelong obedience. Not because there's evidence, but because there's fear. And when fear meets hope, people can be persuaded to believe almost anything. Some belief systems even promise that questioning will lead you back to belief, that the truth will withstand scrutiny. But then, they limit which questions are allowed. Or they push people toward official answers. This creates an illusion of openness, while quietly steering people toward the same conclusions. It's not exploration. It's a maze with only one exit. And at every step, the system trains you to see non-believers as tragic, as lost, as arrogant, as dangerous. This not only protects the belief, It isolates the believer. If everyone outside the system is seen as misguided or corrupt, then there's no reason to listen to them. No reason to read other books. No reason to hear other ideas. And so, the walls stay intact. In the end, religion doesn't just control what people believe. It controls how they think. It shapes their fears, their hopes, their language, their self-worth, their social ties, their view of death, their interpretation of suffering. It becomes a lens through which they see the world. A lens they didn't choose, but were handed long before they could question it. And the irony is that most people inside the system don't see any of this. Not because they're stupid, but because the system was designed to feel natural, to feel comforting, to feel right. That's the essence of brainwashing. You don't feel it happening. It doesn't scream, it whispers. And the whispers sound like your own thoughts. But the truth is, belief that can't survive scrutiny is not strength. It's fragility. And a system that needs to control every part of your mind to survive is not offering truth. It's demanding obedience. If people were truly free to think, to ask, to doubt, without fear, guilt, or shame, most religions would collapse under their own weight. Because they were never built to be questioned. They were built to be obeyed. And the moment you stop obeying, the moment you start thinking for yourself, is the moment you begin to wake up. Thanks for watching. If you're questioning, you're thinking. And that's the first step toward real freedom. Keep going.